Hello, this is Sondra Oster Baras bringing you a few words of Bible from the heart of Biblical Israel. This week's Torah portion is Vayechi, literally meaning "and he lived," and is the final chapters of the book of Genesis, where we have the story essentially of Jacob's death, his blessing of his sons, his burial. There's a huge burial procession where they take him back to the land of Israel and bury him in Hebron, in the tomb of the patriarchs, in the cave of Machpelah, a very interesting reminder that even as Jacob had settled in Egypt, his home was in the land of Israel, and he knew that that is where he needed to be buried, and where, of course, his children would then be able to visit that tomb for centuries ever after. I do want to focus, however, this week on the very, very end of this Torah portion, which tells us a few verses here that talks about the end of Joseph, and then more or less the parting of Joseph and his brothers from the stage. And right before Joseph dies, there are actually two different conversations. The first conversation seems to happen shortly after Jacob's death. This is in chapter 50, and starting in verse 18, where the brothers, or actually starting a little before this, it's starting in verse 15, where they say to Joseph, the brothers come to Joseph and basically said, "Our father commanded us, please to come before you and ask you to forgive us, and that you should forgive us." It's very interesting. Did this conversation with Jacob really ever happen? Or did the brothers make this up in order to bring about some kind of a real peace between Joseph and his brothers? Their fear, of course, is that Joseph was just being nice to his brothers for as long as Jacob was alive, and now that Jacob has gone, will he now take advantage and seek revenge on them for the sale? And of course, the end of that is, Joseph has a wonderful, wonderful statement, and he says, "Am I God? Do you think that I come in place of God? You may have intended me harm, but God intended it for good," which is just like this amazing statement on the part of Joseph, which you can see already reflected earlier when he first meets his brothers. But here, saying it after Jacob's death, it's very, very clear that it's come from a place of real sincerity. And Joseph, therefore, has this amazing sense of God and a sense of God's place in history, that the events that are happening, that have happened to us, you and me, brothers, etc., that have happened to the house of Jacob, that have brought us here to Egypt, that have brought Joseph to this amazing place of grandeur, these are all steps that are part of God's plan. And this is a very, very strong message that he conveys to the brothers as part of this appeasement process. And it is exactly this message that he then gives to them in a different way, but a message that really will be carried on through the generations just before he dies. So we learn at the end that he has descendants, he has children and grandchildren, great grandchildren, etc. And then he gathers his brothers. This is in verse 24, and he says to them, "I am soon to die. God will," and here I'm going to refer to the Hebrew word pakod yifkod. God will something, okay? Now the word pakod yifkod, it can mean remember, it can mean anoint, it can mean count, okay? In my translation says take notice of you. This is one of those words, though, that become code words, literally words that show up again, and unfortunately the English translation doesn't always translate it in the same way. So let's say God will remember you, okay? God will certainly remember you. He will bring you up from this land to the land that he promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And Joseph swore the children of Israel, saying, "God will remember you, and you will bring out my bones from here." And so here there's two things going on. On the one hand, Joseph is promising twice to the brothers that God will remember them and bring them out. And then he adds a request that he wants them to promise him that they will indeed, when they leave Egypt, they will take his bones also and bury him in the land of Israel. Okay? And that's how and then of course we have Joseph died. And that's how the book of Genesis ends. If we skip forward to the book of Exodus, we're going to find something very interesting in Exodus 4 relating to this. Moses has just received his commission from God. He is now going to the children of Israel. He is going to speak to the children of Israel, and he's going to speak to Pharaoh and start the process that will culminate in the Exodus from Egypt. And we have here in chapter 4, verse 29, Moses and Aaron went and gathered all the elders of the children of Israel. And Aaron spoke to them all the things that God had spoken to Moses. And he performed these signs, the miraculous signs, before the eyes of the nation. Okay? And then what did we learn in verse 31? And the nation believed, and they understood that God had remembered the children of Israel. He had seen their suffering, and they bowed and danced and bowed. Okay? Oh, not dance. They bowed low, okay, in homage. Okay? Now, the same word is used here, pakod. It's not just God saw their suffering, he remembered them, using another word called zachar. It's using the word pakod. They remember, the nation believed what Aaron and Moses were saying, and they believed that indeed God had remembered them. And what you can see here is that this word pakod, pakad, or the concept behind it, becomes this code word that is handed down through the generations. Joseph promises the children of Israel, his brothers, and they then convey that promise throughout the generations. One day you will see a sign that God will indeed remember us and bring us out of the land. And when Moses and Aaron come before the elders and tell them what is going on, what God has sent them, what their mission is, we see that the nation believed them because they understood that now was the time that their original promise was going to come true. Pakod ifkod. God would remember the nation and redeem them. Have a wonderful weekend. Shabbat shalom.
I hope you enjoyed that video, and we'd like to be sure you're getting all of our video content. So just click on the subscribe button below, as well as on the notification bell, and that way you will have easy access to all our material. We look forward to staying in touch with you. God bless you, and have a wonderful day.